In this lecture, we are going to install Yeoman on Linux. But before I install Yeoman on Linux and generate my ASP.NET Core app and run it via localhost, I'm going to rerun through the installation of the .NET Versioning Manager and the DNX runtime. And the reason I want to do this is that it can be a little tricky to configure your first application on Linux running ASP.NET Core. But I just want to run through this process again just to get you more familiar. Remember, I'm running it on Ubuntu. If you have CentOS OS, you can refer to the ASP.NET website and ASP.NET Core for all the commands. I will provide these commands in a PDF document in this lecture section. So let's go here and let's install curl again. Let's copy this and let's put it into our command line. It's going to ask for my password. Remember to put sudo because you need the root user to have the administrative rights to execute the command. Put my password, and then we went ahead and we installed curl. Now let's install the .NET Versioning Manager. Let's copy this. I've already copied these commands to a text document. Let's paste this. And as you can see right there, it applied the download to it. Now let's go ahead and install DNX. Let's copy this command. This is the .NET execution. We're installing all the dependencies, and let's say yes, we want to continue to install all these dependencies. Give it a second while it installs all the dependencies. Remember, Linux is just a kernel. All of the packages must be installed on the device to configure the environment to run an ASP.NET Core app. It's a little bit different than Mac OS X and Windows, but once we set it up, we'll be ready to go. Now that we've installed the DNVM and the DNX runtime, let's upgrade the core CLR associated with the .NET execution runtime. So let's copy this. Now we're downloading the latest version of .NET runtime. So now there we are. As you can see, we're on the core CLR RC1 update 2. Now, when we're right there, before we run the next command, let's do dnvm list. And you can see right there we have the core CLR installed, and we have an architecture of 64-bit, so that's what our default runtime is going to be. So now let's install our Kestrel web server. This is what's going to run our application the first time we set it up. We're not binding it to IIS because IIS is not on Linux. We're going to run libuv, which is a multi-platform asynchronous I/O library that is used by Kestrel. And Kestrel is a cross-platform HTTP server for hosting ASP.NET Core web applications. So let's go ahead and copy this command here to install it. And now that we have that, let's press yes, because it wants to install this. Give it a second while it installs it. Now that we have that installed, let's go over here. Let's run this command with curl to download the tars. Let's paste that. So now that we have that installed, let's copy the rest of this here. Essentially what we're doing here is we're installing our library to run our web application on Linux. So all these commands are set up for you. Like I said, you can find these all online. It's a little bit different for each Linux device, whether it's CentOS OS, depending on which Linux operating system you're running. But in this case, I'm just running it for Ubuntu. So now that we have that all set up, we've downloaded all that. Let's update our apt-get, because we are going to go ahead again and install node.js. So let this update it. So now that we have that installed, let's go ahead and install node.js. I know we did it in a previous lecture, but I want to install it now, just so that we're running through this process of installing the .NET Versioning Manager and also the .NET Execution Runtime, just so that you can implement this from scratch. Let's install npm for our libraries here. It's necessary with node.js. Let's press yes. Give it a second while it installs. npm will help get all of the packages associated with node.js when we want to install a library. And once we installed node.js and npm, then we're going to install Yeoman, and then we're going to generate our first application. So now that we're there, let's go ahead and install Yeoman. Let's paste this. And it's saying that it needs administrative rights, so let's put sudo. Give it 1 second. It should install this library associated with node.js. This is why we're running through this process. Sometimes it can be very configuration heavy. Let's go to terminal. Let's open up another terminal runtime here. It's asking for a different version, so let's go over here and let's do sudo apt get install node.js again. Let's put my password. Give that a second while it installs that. Did not like my password. And now we have that. Let's put sudo unstable. Sometimes it doesn't pick up that sudo unstable, what's associated with a stable version. Don't know why it's not picking up the sudo stable. Let's just close that out. Let's see if this installs. Sometimes you have to put a legacy version of node.js to get the generator running, but let's see if it will work without it. So let's go ahead, let's try this. Sudo install g generator. This is going to install the ASP.NET generator associated with Yeoman. Doesn't like that, so let's go back here to and take sudo out of here. Let's put npm. Forgot to put npm. So now once we install that, let's see if our generator will run. So let's go ahead and let's try this again one more time. Let's close this out. We're going to close the terminal. And let's clear the cache of our npm installation. And the reason we're going through this is that sometimes it can be very configuration heavy and have issues with node.js. So let's do that. Let's clear out the cache. Okay, then we're going to go over here, sudo npm install global. We're going to go ahead and install that. Then let's do sudo nstable. Let's give it a stable version. There we go. Now we're installing a stable version of node.js because there's sometimes issues with the non-stable versions when you install Yeoman and try to implement your ASP.NET generator. So now let's go ahead and let's install again Yeoman. We're going to do sudo install g yo. And it doesn't like that, so I keep forgetting to put npm right here. Let's go over here. So we cleared the cache and we installed a stable version of node.js. It has a problem with the generator for our ASP.NET Core app. When it's related to the newest version of node.js, it needs a stable version. Now that that's installed, let's go to npm. Let's do sudo npm install g for global generator ASP.NET. And I wanted to run this process through you because there can be some configuration issues with this. So now let's run yo ASP.NET. And I'm going to type no because I don't want to send statistics back, so you're more than welcome to. So let's do yo ASP.NET. Typing that wrong, yo ASP.NET. It's saying that you don't seem to have the generator for ASP.NET installed. That's what I believed I was doing here. You can see the headache associated with this sometimes. So let's do that. See if we install the generator associated with ASP.NET Core. Give it 1 second while it installs this. You've noticed there's a little bit more issues with building this on a Linux device. Each OS is a little different, but for Mac OS X and Windows, it's a little bit more simple. So now let's do yo ASP.NET. And now look at that. We have our ASP.NET Core web application generator. I can do an empty application, a console app, a web application, or web application basic, an API service, or class library. So I'm just going to do web application basic. And I'm going to name it test app Linux. Now that I have that, it builds, as you'll notice, it builds all my libraries associated with it. I have a gulpfile.js, I have a Docker file, I have a bower.json, app settings, startup.cs, and we're going to examine all these in subsequent lectures, but it generates an ASP.NET Core app, generates my controllers, my views. So I have everything set up here. Now what I'm going to run, I have to type cd to go to this directory, test app Linux. And then when I do that, I have to rebuild the NuGet packages associated with my application. So I'm going to type dnu restore. And it's going to build all my NuGet packages associated with my application. And then the command I'm going to run is dnxweb, which is in my project.json file that executes this application to run from the Kestrel web server so that I can run my application on localhost. So let it build all the NuGet packages associated with my assembly references. You can see some of these, the system.txt, encoding, extensions, all the different items associated with my project. Building all that, as you can see. Now that we've built our application, let's run dnxweb. You have to run dnxweb cd to the folder that your application is in. Let's type dnxweb. Now you can see our application is listing on localhost 500 port. Control-C will shut down your application, but I'm going to go over here, right-click, and let's do Open Link. So this is going to open up our web browser. And you're going to see our application. You can see right here it running. And we'll look at that. We've got an ASP.NET Core app running on Linux. Now, of course, in the previous years, you could run it with Mono. You can run an ASP.NET application with the Mono runtime, but now we have ASP.NET Core. You can see the static files being served from the middleware associated with our application. You can see the www root, the images, what's being rendered. So this is giving you all the rendering that's being utilized in our Kestrel web server and what's being sent out. So as you can see right here, I have my test app Linux. This is the home page. This is the about page. This is the contact page. So this is what's associated out of the box in my web application. So if I go to my folder structure, and let's see where this is running. So as you can see on my home tab, I have my test app Linux. And look at this. This is building all of my files. You see my project.json, my Docker file, my www root. You can see the favicon. You can see my CSS files by default. This is a scaffolded website that's associated with the ASP.NET Core generator utilizing Yeoman. And you can see my site.js, and then you can see my views with my home view. You can look at my controllers if I go back. And this is what's being rendered into the page. So now we have built our first application on Linux, and we are listening on port 5000. I want to thank you for joining me in this lecture. Have a nice day.